Billionaire, in a wheelchair, sat alone at the wedding until a single mom asked, "Will you be my date?" Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The string quartet played beneath golden lights as laughter swirled through the ballroom. Glasses clinked, dresses shimmered, and somewhere between the toasts and the dancing, a man sat quietly near the back. His wheelchair was positioned close to the exit, as if he had chosen invisibility. Grant Walker, the groom's uncle, a billionaire whose name once lit up financial magazines, now sat in the shadows, his tailored suit impeccable, his smile almost convincing. Almost. He had come because family demanded it, because appearances still mattered in a world where pity looked a lot like politeness. Every laugh felt too loud, every glance too brief. People greeted him kindly, then looked away too quickly, pretending not to notice the chair that had replaced his freedom. Grant's accident had been almost a year ago. One rainy night, a collision on the interstate had taken his ability to walk and, for a while, his will to live. Since then, he had learned to move through life in silence, observing, not participating. Weddings, of all things, were the hardest. Watching others dance reminded him of everything that used to be easy. Standing tall, leading someone across a floor, belonging. He rolled his glass gently between his hands, the ice clinking against crystal. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, a man made of wealth and regret. Around him, the music swelled into a waltz. Couples filled the dance floor, their laughter floating like confetti. Grant's chest tightened. He told himself he would leave after the next song. That was when he heard a soft voice beside him. "Excuse me," she said, her tone hesitant yet warm. "Would you like to dance?" Grant looked up. A woman stood before him, holding a small clutch in one hand and her shoes in the other. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely, and a faint blush touched her cheeks. She was not dressed like the others, no designer gown, no diamond earrings. Just a simple blue dress and eyes that carried both exhaustion and kindness. He blinked, unsure if he had misheard. "You are asking me?" She smiled. "Well, everyone else is taken. Besides, my son is asleep in the nursery, and I could use a quiet partner." Grant hesitated. "I cannot exactly dance." "Then we can just sit and listen," she replied, pulling out the empty chair beside him. "Music is still music, even when you are not moving." Something in her voice disarmed him. She did not sound like someone offering pity. She sounded like someone offering company. He nodded slowly, and she sat down. For the first time that night, Grant felt the room fade away. The chandeliers blurred, the laughter softened. The woman introduced herself as Claire. She worked as a nurse at a local hospital, a single mom raising a 6-year-old boy. Her ex-husband had left when the baby was born. Life had been a battle since, but she said it with a quiet strength that silenced his curiosity. They talked about the food, the music, the awkward small talk that came with weddings. She made him laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. Her humor was gentle but real, the kind that came from surviving rather than pretending. When the band shifted to a slow melody, she turned to him again. "You know," she said softly, "you do not have to sit on the sidelines forever." He looked at her, caught off guard. "You think so?" She smiled. "I do. You just need someone who is not afraid to pull you onto the floor." Is a Rastin Sepergardigan in words. Grant did not know why, but something inside him, something long buried under pain and pride, stirred. He had come to this wedding to endure. Now, sitting beside this woman who had nothing to gain from speaking to him, he felt alive again. The music ended. She stood, slipping her shoes back on. "Maybe next time I will make you dance," she teased. He smiled, the words escaping before he could stop them. "I will hold you to that, Miss Claire." She laughed, waved, and disappeared into the crowd. Grant sat there for a long moment, his hand resting on the armrest of his chair, the echo of her voice still warm in his mind. He did not know it yet, but that brief encounter, the nurse with the tired eyes and fearless heart, would change everything he believed about healing, love, and dignity. The night outside was cold, but for the first time in a year, Grant Walker did not feel alone. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of Grant Walker's penthouse. The city stretched far below him, a maze of glass and steel he once ruled with unshakable confidence. Now even reaching for the coffee mug on the counter required focus. His wheelchair hummed softly as he maneuvered through the kitchen, every sound amplified by the quiet. He had not stopped thinking about her, Claire, the woman from the wedding. Her laugh had followed him home, echoing in the hollow spaces of his mind. He had not felt that kind of peace in a long time, the kind that came from being seen, not pitied. Still, she was a stranger, and strangers moved on. Later that week, his doctor insisted he begin a new round of physical therapy. Grant had resisted for months. Pain had become part of his routine, and so had denial. But something about Claire's voice, "You just need someone who is not afraid to pull you onto the floor," had lingered. It made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, recovery was not just about movement, but about believing again. At the clinic, the scent of antiseptic greeted him. The hum of machines, the shuffle of nurses, and the rhythmic clatter of crutches formed a strange symphony of survival. He rolled into the therapy ward, eyes scanning the room without expectation. Then he froze. Across the room, adjusting a patient's monitor with gentle precision, was Claire. She looked different in scrubs, focused, composed, yet still carrying that same quiet warmth. When she turned and saw him, her eyes widened in disbelief, then softened into a smile. "Mr. Walker," she said, walking toward him. "I did not expect to see you here." He chuckled, embarrassed. "Neither did I. My doctor finally won the argument. Thanks, service. It is now what it is." "Well," she said, adjusting the strap on his wheelchair, "then I am honored to continue where we left off." He raised an eyebrow. "At the wedding?" "At the dance," she corrected, smiling. "You never did take me up on it." For the first time, he laughed without reservation. Claire guided him into the therapy schedule with the same mix of professionalism and kindness she had shown that night. She explained each exercise clearly, never rushing, never looking away when the pain creased his expression. At first, Grant tried to maintain his usual composure. The man who once commanded boardrooms now struggled to lift his own leg. Every repetition felt like an admission of weakness. But Claire never treated it that way. She spoke to him like an equal, not a patient. "You do not have to prove anything," she told him one afternoon as he clenched his fists in frustration. "Healing is not about pride. It is about showing up even when you want to disappear." Her words landed deeper than she knew. Over the next few weeks, their sessions became the only part of his day that felt real. Between stretches and small victories, they talked about her son Noah, about the challenges of raising a child alone while working night shifts. Grant listened, captivated by her resilience. She laughed easily but carried the weight of too many responsibilities. One evening, as the last light faded through the tall windows of the rehab center, he asked quietly, "Do you ever get tired?" She smiled, tightening a band on his arm. "Every day. But then I remember that someone out there has it harder, and that keeps me moving." He looked at her, realizing how different she was from everyone who surrounded him before the accident. No ulterior motives, no polite pretense, just raw sincerity. One rainy Friday, the session ended later than usual. The parking lot shimmered under the streetlights as thunder rolled in the distance. Claire walked him to the front door, holding her umbrella over both of them. "Looks like the city is trying to drown us again," she joked. He smiled. "You are not very good at letting people fend for themselves, are you?" "Not when they look like they could use a friend," she replied softly. He hesitated, then asked, "Would you maybe let me thank you? Dinner, perhaps?" She shook her head gently. "You do not need to thank me, Mr. Walker. You just need to keep showing up." He watched her leave, the rain tracing silver lines down her umbrella. Something inside him ached, not the usual physical pain, but the slow, unfamiliar warmth of hope. That night, Grant sat by the window, staring at the skyline. The storm blurred the city lights into watercolor streaks. For the first time since his accident, he did not feel like a ghost watching the world move without him. He felt present. He reached for his phone, opened the browser, and typed, "Adaptive ballroom dance lessons for wheelchair users." His lips curved into a faint, determined smile. Because if there was one thing Grant Walker had learned from Claire, it was this: healing was not just surviving the crash, it was learning how to live again, even when the music had changed. The weeks turned into months, and Grant Walker's progress surprised everyone except Claire. She had seen the determination hiding beneath his calm exterior. Each morning he arrived earlier, stayed longer, and refused to leave until he completed every exercise, no matter how small. The staff began to whisper that the once distant billionaire was changing, not just in strength but in spirit. One late afternoon, Claire found him in the therapy room long after the other patients had left. The lights glowed softly against the sterile walls, and the rhythmic hum of the monitor filled the silence. He was practicing, transferring himself from the wheelchair to the parallel bars, his face tense with effort. Sweat dripped down his temple, but there was pride in his eyes. "You should be resting," she said gently, placing his water bottle on the table. He shook his head. "I will rest when I can stand on my own again." "You are pushing too hard," she warned. Grant gave her a half smile. Coming from the woman who works double shifts and still finds time to volunteer at the children's ward? Her laugh was soft but tired. "Touché." She helped him back into the chair, her hands steady on his shoulders. For a brief moment he looked up at her, realizing how close she was. Her hair smelled faintly of lavender and hospital soap. The world around them faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the machines and the echo of their breathing. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For not treating me like I am broken." Her expression softened. "You are not broken, Grant. You just need to remember who you were before the world tried to define you by what you lost." He wanted to respond, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded, holding her gaze until she smiled again and stepped back. In the following weeks, their connection deepened in small, unspoken ways. Claire brought coffee for him on early mornings. He asked about her son, Noah, and started sending small gifts for the boy books. Puzzles, little things that made him smile. She protested at first, but he insisted it was just gratitude. Still, gratitude began to look a lot like affection. One evening, as they were reviewing his progress charts, his assistant, Robert, arrived unexpectedly. Dressed in a sharp suit, he stood awkwardly by the door. "Mr. Walker, the board is requesting your presence at the quarterly meeting next week," he said. "They want to see you back in action." Grant sighed. "Tell them I am still recovering." Robert hesitated. "With respect, sir, investors are getting restless. The company needs a public appearance." It would reassure them. Claire glanced at Grant. "You do not have to prove anything to anyone." He smiled faintly. "I might not, but the world still thinks I do." After Robert left, the room fell quiet. Claire folded her arms. "They only care about your name, not your well-being." He met her eyes. "That is why I am learning to walk again, not for them, but to remind myself I can." Her lips parted as if to argue, but she stopped. "Then promise me one thing. No matter what happens at that meeting, you will not let them make you feel small." "I promise," he said. The next week, Grant appeared at the company headquarters for the first time in nearly a year. Cameras flashed, microphones waited, and reporters whispered about the fallen billionaire. He rolled into the boardroom with quiet dignity, ignoring the murmurs. His assistant began the presentation, but when it was time for him to speak, Grant took the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice firm, "I may no longer walk as I once did, but I am not here to talk about loss. I am here to talk about purpose. This company was built on innovation, not image. And innovation begins with courage." The room fell silent. Even the harshest critics lowered their gaze. That evening, Claire found the video of his speech online. Her eyes filled with tears. The comments section was flooded with messages calling him an inspiration. The next morning, Grant returned to the clinic, a hint of pride lighting his face. "You saw it, did you not?" "I did," she said, smiling. "You were magnificent." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You believed in me before anyone else did." She shrugged. Sometimes belief is the first medicine. They resumed therapy, but the air between them had changed. Every look lingered a little longer, every silence spoke louder than words. When the session ended, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I have been meaning to ask," he said. "Next weekend, there is a charity gala for spinal injury research. It is formal, but I promise there will be no dancing unless you count slow rolling across the floor." She laughed. "Are you asking me to be your date?" He smiled a little shyly. "I am." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Mr. Walker, but only if you promise not to make me cry with another speech." "No promises," he said, his grin spreading. As she walked away, Grant watched her go, realizing that somewhere between pain and persistence, Between brokenness and hope, he had found something more powerful than recovery. He had found the reason to keep living. And her name was Claire. The night of the charity gala arrived with a chill in the autumn air. The downtown ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers, the kind of place that had once felt like Grant Walker's natural habitat. Yet tonight, he approached it with a quiet humility that had nothing to do with wealth. His tailored black suit fit perfectly, but the wheelchair beneath him remained a reminder of what life had taken and what it had given back. Claire met him outside the entrance. She wore a dark green dress that fell softly around her knees, simple yet elegant. Her hair was swept to one side, and her eyes held that familiar steadiness he had come to rely on. For a moment, Grant forgot the stares from the arriving guests, forgot the whispers that followed him wherever he went. She smiled, and the noise of the city faded into silence. "You clean up well, Mr. Walker," she said playfully. He smiled. "I could say the same for you, Miss Claire. But something tells me you would look stunning in anything." She laughed, shaking her head. "You sound like a man who used to give a lot of interviews." "Once upon a time," he replied. Inside, the gala buzzed with opulence, crystal glasses, live music, and polite conversations about generosity. Yet beneath the glitter, Grant felt the familiar weight of scrutiny. People's eyes flickered toward his chair, then quickly away. He had grown used to it, but tonight he was not alone. Claire's hand rested lightly on his shoulder as she leaned in and whispered, "Ignore them. They are just wondering why the richest man in the room looks happier than they do." He smiled. "I have a better reason than most." Later that evening, as dinner plates were cleared and the speeches began, the host introduced Grant to the stage. The room fell silent. Claire squeezed his hand before he rolled forward. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady but warm. "When I woke up in a hospital bed nearly a year ago, I thought my life was over. Not because I could not move, but because I believed that what I had lost defined me. Tonight I am here to tell you that healing is not measured by how fast you stand. It is measured by how deeply you learn to live again." The audience listened, rapt. "I spent months believing that strength was something I could buy, fix, or control. But the truth is, strength is what you find when someone refuses to give up on you. I would not be here without the people who reminded me that dignity and kindness can rebuild what money cannot." His eyes found Claire in the crowd. For a fleeting moment she looked away, hiding the tears gathering in her eyes. When he finished, the applause rose like thunder. The entire ballroom stood. Claire clapped the longest, her hands trembling slightly. After the event, as the guests began to leave, Grant and Claire slipped out to the terrace. The city lights stretched beneath them, endless and alive. The cool wind brushed against their faces, carrying the faint sound of music from inside. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "You spoke from your heart." "I just said what was true," he replied. "Everything you taught me." She shook her head. "I did not teach you. You did the work. You found yourself again." He turned his chair toward her, his expression earnest. "Maybe, but you reminded me what it meant to be human again." Before she could answer, the doors behind them opened. A tall man in a gray suit stepped out, Robert Grant's assistant. His tone was low but urgent. "Mr. Walker, I need a word. It is about the crash report. We received new information tonight." Grant frowned. "What kind of information?" Robert hesitated, glancing at Claire. "Maybe we should speak privately." Claire nodded. "It is all right. I will wait." Robert leaned close, speaking quietly. "The police reopened the investigation. It seems the brakes on your car were tampered with. Someone wanted that crash to happen." Grant froze. For months he had believed the accident was just bad luck, a storm, a slippery road, fate. Now the truth landed like a blade in his chest. "Who?" he asked. "They are still verifying, but there is evidence pointing to one of your own executives, someone who would benefit from your absence." Grant's jaw tightened. "Keep me updated. No one else hears about this until I say so." They were shabby wired up. When Robert left, Claire was still by the railing, her eyes searching his face. "What is wrong?" He forced a smile. "Just business matters. Nothing for you to worry about." She studied him, unconvinced. "You do not have to protect me from the truth, Grant." He sighed, his voice low. "Some truths are heavier than they look, and tonight I would rather remember what it feels like to breathe again." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Then breathe with me." They stood in silence, the city flickering below, like 1,000 tiny stars. Claire's warmth radiated beside him, steady and real. Grant wanted to tell her everything, the fear, the betrayal, the sudden rage burning beneath his calm, but for now, he let the moment live untouched. As the music from the ballroom faded into a slow piano melody, Claire smiled. You know, I think you would make a great dancer after all. He chuckled softly. You might regret saying that. Try me, she whispered. Grant reached for her hand, and together they swayed gently under the night sky. He could not stand yet, but that did not matter. In that quiet rhythm wheelchair and heels gliding side by side, Grant Walker finally felt whole again. Neither of them knew it yet, but this night of beauty and calm would soon unravel into the storm that would test every promise they had made. For now, though, there was only light, laughter, and the echo of music carrying their hearts toward morning. The next morning, the warmth of the gala still lingered in Grant Walker's mind, but it was quickly overshadowed by unease. Robert's words kept replaying the brakes were tampered with. Every moment from that night came back in flashes. The screech of tires, the smell of smoke, the pain, the months of silence that followed. He had learned to accept his fate, but not this new truth. He arrived at the clinic early. Claire was already there, adjusting equipment, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She turned when she heard his chair roll in. You are early, she said, smiling. I could not sleep, he admitted. Big night? She teased. He hesitated. Big and complicated. She caught the shift in his tone. Is something wrong? He wanted to tell her everything, but the words stayed trapped behind his pride. Just business, he said finally. Things I need to fix. Claire nodded, but her eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Well, whatever it is, do not let it steal what you have fought for. You have come too far. They began therapy, the familiar rhythm grounding them both. Yet Grant's thoughts kept drifting. Every repetition, every stretch was haunted by the question who would want him gone. Later that day, Robert called with an update. The investigators found the maintenance logs. The technician who serviced your car never existed. The order was forged under the name of an assistant from our corporate branch. Grant's voice hardened. Send me everything. When he ended the call, he noticed Claire watching him from across the hall. She walked over quietly. Grant, you look like you are about to go to war. Maybe I am, he said. She sighed. Whatever battle you are about to fight, just remember, revenge is not healing. He met her gaze. This is not revenge, Claire. It is justice. That evening, he returned home and opened the file Robert had sent. Names, transactions, emails, every piece pointed to one man, Richard Hale, his former business partner, the same man who had taken over temporary control of the company after Grant's accident. Rage burned in his chest, but beneath it was something deeper disbelief that someone he once called a friend could wish him dead. The next day at therapy, Grant seemed quieter. Claire worked beside him, her hands steady but her expression curious. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Do you believe people can lose their soul-chasing power? She looked at him carefully. Yes, but I also believe they can find it again, if someone reminds them what matters. He nodded slowly. Then maybe that is what I need to do. After the session, Grant drove to the corporate headquarters. Cameras flashed again when he entered the building, the media eager for another appearance. But this time, his silence was not uncertainty. It was focus. He requested an emergency board meeting, presenting the evidence with calm precision. Every word landed like a verdict. When Richard Hale tried to interrupt, Grant cut him off. You left me to die on that road, but I lived. And now I will make sure no one in this company ever suffers under greed disguised as leadership again. They were city ill and as lashed to and bowed. When you got in axe to me, the board voted unanimously to remove Richard from power. Justice, quiet but absolute, was served. That night, Grant returned to the rehab center. Claire was still there, finishing her shift. When she saw him, she smiled, though her eyes reflected concern. You did it, did you not? He nodded. It is over. Does it feel better? She asked softly. He thought for a moment. It feels lighter, but not because I won, because I told the truth. Claire placed a hand on his. That is healing, Grant. He looked at her, the fatigue in his eyes giving way to warmth. You once said I just needed someone who was not afraid to pull me onto the floor. I think you did more than that, Claire. You taught me to stand again, She smiled, her voice almost a whisper. Then stand with me. Grant reached for her hand, gripping it gently. For the first time, the pain in his body did not define him. The night outside was quiet, and for a moment, they simply breathed together, two souls who had fought their way back to life, finding peace not in wealth or power, but in kindness and truth. The following weeks brought a calm that Grant Walker had not felt in years. The corporate storm had passed, the man who betrayed him was gone, and the company was finally back under his control. Yet, despite the victory, Grant found himself spending more time at the rehab center than in the boardroom. The place had become more than therapy. It had become the heartbeat of his new life. Claire was there almost every day. She would greet him with her soft smile and her endless patience, the kind that could steady a storm. Sometimes they talked for hours after sessions, long after the other patients had gone home. It was not about medicine or progress anymore. It was about life, about Noah's school projects, about the hospital's endless paperwork, about Grant's slow rediscovery of laughter. One evening, Claire was reviewing his chart when she noticed something different. "Your balance scores are improving fast," she said, eyes lighting up. "You are walking more steps each day." Grant grinned. "It feels good to hear that from my favorite nurse." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Flattery will not get you out of today's exercises." "Worth a try," he replied, chuckling. As she steadied him between the parallel bars, Grant took a deep breath. His arms trembled, but his focus did not waver. Step by step, he moved forward. It was not graceful, but it was real. When he reached the end of the bars, Claire clapped her hands softly. "You did it." He looked up, breathing hard but smiling. "We did it." Their eyes met and lingered. For a moment, the air between them felt alive, quiet, full, and undeniable. Later that night, as Claire packed her things, Grant waited by the entrance. "Would you come to dinner with me?" he asked. "No charity events, no reporters, just dinner." She hesitated. "Grant, it is not about thanks," he said gently. "It is about wanting to share something real." Her lips curved into a shy smile. "All right, but only if you let me choose the place." The next evening, they met at a small diner tucked between city streets. Nothing fancy, just the smell of coffee and warm bread. Noah sat beside his mother, swinging his legs under the table. He looked at Grant curiously. "Are you the man Mom helps walk again?" Grant laughed. "Yes, I guess I am." "Mom says you never give up," the boy said proudly. Grant smiled. "Neither does she." The drawn. They spent the evening sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments that did not need words. When they left, Claire walked beside his chair, the cool wind brushing against their faces. "You know," she said softly, "I think you have already healed." Grant looked up at her. "Not completely, but I think I am getting there." A few days later, Grant surprised everyone at the rehab center. He had been practicing secretly with one of the therapists, preparing for something special. When Claire entered the room, he was standing, leaning lightly on a cane. She froze, eyes wide with disbelief. "Grant," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are standing." He smiled. "You told me not to give up." "Lever go no." She covered her mouth, tears shining in her eyes. He reached out a hand. "Would you like to finish that dance we never had?" She nodded, unable to speak. Slowly he took her hand, and they moved together imperfectly, carefully, beautifully. The moment was small, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived. When the song ended, he looked at her with quiet certainty. "You gave me back my life, Claire. I do not ever want to imagine it without you again." She met his gaze through tears. "Then do not. It is say said's people crime to the souls my axel filing." And in that soft, sunlit room where pain had once lived, Grant Walker, once broken, now whole, held the woman who had taught him that true healing begins when two hearts choose to stay. The morning after that quiet dance, sunlight poured gently into Grant Walker's apartment. The world outside was still gray from the lingering winter, but for the first time in years, he woke up without the weight of dread pressing on his chest. His cane leaned against the nightstand, a simple symbol of progress. But what mattered more was the warmth in his heart every time he thought of Claire and Noah. He looked at the framed photograph on his desk. It was from the night of the charity gala, the moment caught mid-smile, Claire's hand resting gently on his shoulder. It reminded him of how far he had come from a man who wanted to disappear into the shadows to someone who had found light again. That afternoon, he visited the rehab center, not for therapy, but to see Claire. She was charting patient notes, her hair falling slightly into her face as she wrote. When she looked up, her eyes brightened instantly. "You are early," she said. "I could not stay away," he replied. She laughed softly. "That sounds dangerously close to flirting." "Maybe it is," he said, his tone sincere. "Because I think I am done pretending that this is only friendship." The pen slipped from her fingers. "Grant." He moved closer, steadying himself on the cane. "You told me healing is not about walking again. It is about learning how to live. You are the reason I learned that. And now, I want to live with you." Claire looked down, emotion catching in her throat. "I never expected that. You were a patient. I was just doing my job." "You were never just doing your job," he said quietly. "You were saving me in ways medicine never could." She met his gaze, tears brimming. "Grant, I am a single mother with too many bills and not enough hours in the day. You are, you, a billionaire with a world that does not fit mine." He smiled gently. "Then we will build a new world, one that fits both of us." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She frowned as she read the message, her expression changing from emotion to shock. "It is from the hospital," she whispered. "They need me in the ICU right now." Grant's concern replaced his smile. "What happened?" "It is Noah," she said, her voice trembling. "He collapsed at school." Within an hour, they were at the hospital. Machines beeped rhythmically beside Noah's small bed. The boy looked pale, a stark contrast to his usual energy. Doctors explained that he had a severe infection that had spread quickly. Claire gripped the bed rail, her knuckles white. "He will be all right, won't he?" she asked desperately. Grant stood beside her, his heart aching. "Whatever it takes," he said firmly. "Do whatever is needed. I will handle the cost." But Claire shook her head. "This is not about money. I cannot lose him." Through the night, Grant stayed by her side. He brought her coffee, covered her with his jacket when she fell asleep for a few minutes in the chair, and quietly handled every detail from calling specialists to arranging treatment. He did not leave, not once. At dawn, when the doctor came in with a faint smile, Claire held her breath. "The antibiotics are working," the doctor said. "His condition is improving." The relief hit her like a wave. She covered her face and began to cry. Grant knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hand in his. "He is strong," he whispered, "just like his mother." She looked at him through tears. "I do not know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Do not. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When he wakes up, tell him he gave me another reason to keep walking." Claire let out a broken laugh and leaned her head against his shoulder. "You really are impossible," she said softly. "Maybe," he murmured, his voice full of warmth. "But you made me that way." Bist is absence in the radiwinity bist just. Inis hable. And as the sun rose over the hospital windows, painting the room in gold, Grant Walker knew he was no longer just a man learning to heal. He was part of something larger, a family built not from perfection, but from love that refused to give up. 2 days later, the hospital room was no longer filled with the sound of alarms and rushing footsteps. The beeping of the heart monitor had settled into a calm, steady rhythm. Noah stirred for the first time since his collapse, his small hand moving weakly against the sheets. Claire leaned forward instantly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "You scared me." "Thanks for watching." The boy blinked groggily, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom? Did I miss school again?" Claire laughed through her tears. "Yes, but I think you have a pretty good excuse." Grant stood near the window, watching the sunrise stretch across the city skyline. When Noah looked over and spotted him, his face brightened. "Mr. Walker," he said, voice soft but cheerful. "Did you come to see me?" Grant smiled warmly. "Of course I did. Someone had to make sure my favorite little man was okay." Noah grinned faintly. "Mom says you helped her a lot." "I think she helped me more," Grant replied. When the doctor came in with the morning update, the news was good. Noah's infection had stabilized, and he would make a full recovery with a few days of rest. Relief washed over the room like sunlight after a storm. Claire finally allowed herself to breathe again. Later that afternoon, while Noah slept peacefully, Grant stepped out to the corridor. The rhythmic hum of hospital life surrounded him, the soft shuffle of nurses, the distant sound of an elevator bell. Claire joined him a moment later, her shoulders slumping from exhaustion. "You should go home and rest," he said gently. You have been here for 2 nights straight. She shook her head. I cannot leave him yet. He turned his chair to face her, his tone quiet but firm. Then at least let me stay with you. You should not have to go through this alone. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they had been through together. When Claire finally looked up, her eyes shimmered. Grant, when I met you, I never imagined this. You were a stranger at a wedding, and now you are here, holding my whole world together. He smiled. Maybe we were both strangers who needed someone to believe in us. Just then, Robert appeared at the end of the hall, holding a folder. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Walker, but the press wants a statement about the case. They are asking how you managed to uncover the truth about the crash. Grant hesitated, then looked at Claire. I think I know what to tell them. He rolled forward to the media room near the hospital lobby. Cameras flashed as reporters surrounded him. His voice was calm, resolute. Justice was never about vengeance. It was about truth. I survived because good people refused to give up on me. And now, it is my turn to make sure others have that same chance. When the conference ended, he returned to Claire and Noah's room. She looked at him with quiet pride. You handled that perfectly. I just told them the truth, he said. That kindness is not weakness, it is strength. She smiled and reached for his hand. You have changed, Grant Walker. He looked at her and shook his head gently. No, Claire. You changed me. The door opened, and Noah's small voice interrupted their moment. Mom, Mr. Walker, are we going home soon? Claire laughed. Yes, sweetheart, soon. Grant leaned closer. And when you are better, I am taking both of you somewhere special. Where? Noah asked. He smiled. Somewhere with more dancing and less hospitals. Claire's laugh was soft but full of emotion. You are impossible. Maybe, he said, but I finally have something worth being impossible for. Outside, the evening light poured through the hospital windows, wrapping them in gold. For the first time, Grant did not see a future defined by loss. He saw a home, a family, and a love that had survived every test life had thrown their way. 3 weeks later, spring settled over the city like a soft breath of renewal. The hospital stay was behind them, and Noah was back to his lively self, running ahead of his mother as they walked into the sunny courtyard of Grant Walker's Rehabilitation Center. The trees bloomed with early pink blossoms, and laughter echoed between the glass walls. Grant stood near the garden path, leaning slightly on his cane. His movements were still careful, but every step carried pride. Claire watched him for a moment before speaking. You are walking without anyone's help now, she said softly. He smiled. I had good motivation. Noah ran toward him, holding something behind his back. Close your eyes, Mr. Walker. Grant obeyed, grinning. When he opened them again, Noah was holding a drawing, a picture of 3 people holding hands under a blue sky. Above it, in uneven letters, it read, My family. Grant's throat tightened. Is this us? Noah nodded proudly. Mom said families are not just about blood. They are about love. Grant knelt slowly, his eyes glistening. Then I guess I am the luckiest man in the world. Claire stood behind her son, her eyes shining. She reached out and helped Grant up, their hands intertwining naturally, as if they had always belonged that way. That evening, the 3 of them sat by the lake behind the rehab center. The air smelled of fresh rain, and the sunset painted the water in hues of gold and rose. Claire leaned against Grant's shoulder, while Noah tossed pebbles into the water, laughing at the ripples. Grant broke the silence, his voice low but sure. Claire, before all of this, I thought money could fix everything. I built empires, made headlines, and still felt empty. Then you came along, and you showed me what wealth really is. She turned to him, smiling softly. And what is it, Mr. Walker? Is Haddon Terrence training? He took her hand gently. It is waking up and knowing there is someone worth living for. Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. You already had that strength inside you. You just needed someone to remind you. He looked toward Noah, who was still playing by the water's edge, and back at her. Then consider this my reminder. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Claire froze, her breath catching as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring. Claire, he said softly, you have been my anchor, my friend, and my reason to heal. I am not asking for perfection, only partnership. Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to face anything alone again? For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then Claire smiled through her tears and nodded. Yes, Grant. 1,000 times yes. Noah turned at the sound of her voice, running toward them. Mom, what happened? Grant laughed and lifted the boy into his arms. Something very good, Noah. Your mom just agreed to let me be part of your family officially. The boy's eyes widened. So that means we get to live together? If your mom says yes, Grant teased. Claire laughed, wiping her eyes. I think that can be arranged. The three of them stood together as the sun sank below the horizon. The wind rustled gently through the blooming trees, carrying with it the soft scent of new beginnings. Grant looked at the woman and the child beside him, the two people who had turned his pain into purpose. You once told me healing was not about walking again, he said quietly. You were right. It is about learning to love again. And as the last light of day reflected off the calm water, Grant Walker finally understood that true healing did not end with recovery. It began with the courage to open one's heart and the grace to let love stay.